I've got two mic shows that I'd like to do.
It's the road show.
Well, I guess I'll begin.
Okay, go ahead.
Madam Mayor and honorable council members, commissioners, thank you very much for having us. It's certainly a pleasure, and to the constituents that I represent, thank you for letting us appear today. It's certainly nice to be back in front of smiling faces, which is sometimes in stark contrast to Tallahassee, the chamber that we sit in. So it's good to be home. We wanted to come by and just tell you a little bit about what happened up in Tallahassee. When I campaigned, the last time I was here, I was running for office. That was about a year ago. And through that process, I met all the commissioners and the mayor and city manager, the attorney, and developed my own rapport with each one of you. And one thing that I told you is that if I were to be sent to Tallahassee, and certainly I told my constituents this as well, if you sent me to Tallahassee, I would fight to allow our locally elected leaders to control the way that they want to run their city with the input of their constituents. And we often heard that on the campaign trail, that we want to keep government small, we want to keep government local. And lo and behold, I get to Tallahassee and we consistently see the leadership there, a different party than I belong to, try to usurp the home rule authority of our cities. And they do it time and time again. And they did it again this session. They tried to take the decision-making power away from you. If you as a city council wanted to instill better and higher benefits for your city employees through wage theft protection, they didn't want you to have that authority. So what they did is they passed a bill that preempted home rule authority when it came to wage theft protection ordinances. Now, fortunately, because of the good efforts of men and women in the Senate, that bill was gutted, and eventually it only applies to, I think, sick time, if I recall correctly. But that is the theme in Tallahassee, is let's preach law government, but when we go up there, let's take home rule authority away. My commitment to you then and now is that I will continue to fight against usurping your authority and your ability to govern locally. I want to thank particularly Commissioner Maxwell for joining me up in Tallahassee. As you may know, Jeff Clemens and I filed HB 101, which was an enterprise zone for the city of Lake Worth. Unfortunately, because of politics, it did die in the Senate. It was moving forward in the House, and that's not a reflection upon Senator Clemens. It just, there was a chairwoman that did not believe in bestowing tax incentives upon local governments, and so it died. We are committed to reintroducing that bill next year, and hopefully in the off-season we can work to strengthen our approach. I did want to talk about two bills that I passed this session. I'm very fortunate to have been able to pass a couple of bills. The first one is, and I think it applies particularly important to the city of Lake Worth. If you drive through District 87, which is where I represent Lake Clark Shores, parts of Lake Worth, Green Acres, West Palm, Palm Springs, if you drive up and down Military Trail, you will see what we call massage parlors. And they're oftentimes tinted out. They have neon signs that say open 24 hours. They advertise all-girl staff. So I'm a former police officer. My father was a 25-year veteran of the Lake Worth Police Force. I think we all know what's going on inside of these. A lot of people, when I filed this bill, said, you know, what's the big deal, Dave? Do we really want to interrupt these activities? The offensiveness of that aside, what's going on in those facilities is actually human trafficking and sexual trafficking. And my constituents are often surprised to learn that in Florida, we are number 3 in the nation for human sexual trafficking. So what I proposed, and what Senator Clemens proposed in the Senate, was a bill to regulate these establishments, to close them down at night, between 12 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning, and to disallow the domiciling of the employees. What we found through criminal investigation is that young women are brought to this country with the promise of a good job. Whether they're here lawfully or not was irrelevant to me. My belief is if they're in this country, they ought to be protected by the law when it comes to human trafficking and sexual trafficking. What we found was they're brought over here, promised a good job, they're forced into these sexual establishments, they're forced into sexual servitude, they're forced to live there. They oftentimes don't know the language, they can't reach out to law enforcement, or they're scared to reach out to law enforcement, and they're never allowed to leave, and that becomes their life. So by restricting the operating hours from 12 to 6, we can now stop that man that's going in and out at 3 o'clock in the morning. The collateral damage is to the general public. If you live near one of these establishments, you have this constant travel at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. So it's going to improve the quality of life of the people that live around this establishment. With that said, it passed the House and the Senate unanimously. It's on the governor's desk. I'm hopeful it will be signed. My father asked me, is this going to stop human trafficking? My honest response was, Dad, I don't know, but I do know that it will empower Captain Silva and his men and women in uniform to get into those establishments. It'll allow our prosecutors to investigate these places, and it'll be one chain in the link to shutting these places down and protecting everybody, regardless of their immigration status. The second bill I want to talk very briefly about is a sunshine exemption that I put forth in the House and that Jeff Clemens put forth in the Senate. In Palm Beach County, we're very fortunate to have a commission called the Criminal Justice Commission. I'm sure some of the members of this commission sit on the Palm Beach County Criminal Justice Commission. The sheriff sits on the commission. The state attorney sits on the commission. As you elected officials are well aware, the sunshine law prohibits you from communicating with each other. Whatever the intent of that law is, it was frustrating the ability of the sheriff and the state attorney to investigate crimes and be able to communicate in private. So what we saw happen, and I should disclose that I'm a member of the Criminal Justice Commission as a legislative appointee. What we found was the sheriff and the state attorney were refusing to sit on this commission because the moment that they sat on that commission, the sunshine law applied to them. It was an unintended consequence. I followed a bill to rectify that, and fortunately it passed the House and the Senate unanimously. My hope is that the sheriff, the state attorney, our chief judge, our public defender will now return to the Criminal Justice Commission and participate. My other hope is that our model will spread throughout the state, that other counties will adopt our model, that will get all the stakeholders together, and that we can have an effective and efficient Criminal Justice Commission. With that said, it's an honor to serve. It's not always a pleasure to serve out there, but it really, truly is an honor for me, and I appreciate the support, and thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Lori Berman, and I'm a second term representative, but I'm new to representing the city of Lake Worth, so I'm excited to be here tonight and talk to all of you. The one responsibility that we in the legislature have is to pass a budget, and this year, thankfully, there was a little more money in the budget, so we didn't have to cut things as much, and I'll let Jeff go into a little more about some of the things we tried to do in Palm Beach County. We got some things in the budget, then there were some other issues that occurred. But overall, I thought the budget was a good budget, and it was the first time I was able to vote for it. We have raises for teachers, we have raises for state employees, we have some funding for the Everglades, so I was really pleased to support it. The one thing that was the elephant in the room was that we did not expand Medicaid coverage. And I'm terribly disappointed about it. I think it's a bad decision. We had the governor, and it wasn't a decision, it wasn't a Democrat versus Republican kind of issue. The governor supported the expansion. There was a plan proposed in the Senate by Senator Negron that passed 39-1 in the Senate to take the federal dollars down. And we in the House the Speaker would not allow it to be heard on the floor. And the repercussions are that Florida has about 1 million people who won't get insurance, who would have been under this Medicaid expansion. And they're not the poorest of the poor, they're the working poor, because the poorest of the poor already get Medicaid. This is really the working poor. And the other consequence is we continue to be a donor state. Our tax dollars are not going to be coming down here, they're going to be going out of state. We could, the estimate is something like $51 billion over 10 years if we took the Medicaid expansion, and we didn't. So, in the first year alone, it's something like $5 billion that we're going to be losing out on. And it's going to hurt our businesses. Our businesses community was also very much in favor of Medicaid expansion. The hospitals especially took a big lead, but in addition, the Chamber of Commerce, the associated industries, they also all advocated for expansion. So that was a big disappointment about the session. I always like to tell you about the laws that affect you directly as